Ronald Reed, the attorney, Elizabeth Vale, our consultant, Kathy Eisman, and then Nat was on. I think he'll be on any minute, hopefully. I think just a couple housekeeping things. The next meeting is Tuesday, the 28th of December. I think I was talking with Liz Vale and Kathy yesterday, and Liz mentioned that we don't necessarily need to differentiate the work session from the meeting the way we've been doing. It just kind of evolved that way. So maybe going forward, what we'll do is call to order the meeting, do the Pledge of Allegiance at the beginning at 5. We'll still start the meeting at 5. And then we will hold off on any like public hearing portions of the meeting till the second part of the meeting, let's say, which is kind of what we've been doing now anyway. But just a little housekeeping issue. So I don't see Nat yet, but we have a quorum, so I think we should go ahead and get started, and we can loop him in. So the first item on the agenda for the work session is 6 Havens Lane, and it's a lot line subdivision proposal. We've discussed before. Kathy did a memo about it.
Hey, I'm sorry. Just want to let you know Nat is logged in. Hi, Nat.
Hi, Nat. Great. All right, we're just getting started, Nat. We're talking about 6 Havens Lane. So referring everyone to Kathy's memo, which was dated July 1st, 2020. It's a minor subdivision plan. And there's some issues, including that less the wetland area on the lot. It doesn't support the minimum area needed for a lot in the village. Did I say that correctly, Kathy?
That's correct.
But also maybe before we keep going, is someone from the applicant present on the call?
Yes, Eddie Corcoran, the owner,
Okay.
is present.
So there's another issue as well. The proposed subdivision, one of the smaller lot in the proposed subdivision it's sort of an odd shape. It would be a, challenging build on that lot. Is that correct, Kathy?
Yeah, lot 2 is sort of this L-shaped lot that has a very small building envelope and an odd shape. Then the last thing is that it creates a nonconformity for lot 1 for lot width. A minimum of 100 feet is required for the minimum lot width. And 53 feet is proposed, but that actually is something that we had to scale out, I believe. It wasn't written, it wasn't actually noted on the map.
So procedurally, Liz and or Kathy, where are we with this?
Well, in order for them to move forward, they would need variances for lot area, and I guess additional variances depending on. So they'd have to go to ZBA to get variances before they could proceed with a subdivision before this board.
Okay.
If they don't meet the lot area for 20,000 square feet. They don't have the yield for the proposed subdivision, so they have to really take it back and reassess how they're going to proceed.
Okay. So Eddie, for the applicant, the owner.
Yes.
When this came up a little bit before, I don't know if you were working with Brian DeSessa at some point.
Yes.
Are you still, or?
Well, no, Brian left the firm that he was with, so right now I'm just representing myself.
Okay.
I guess, do you mind if I speak for a moment just to address? I actually read back on some of the notes from back in 2020 that the board had questions regarding, that they were posed to the attorney at the time regarding, what the applicant was looking to do, and just, a general understanding of, why the subdivision application was presented as it's currently presented. I mean, basically, we're a young family. We purchased this piece of property, in the village. It's quite a large parcel, total square footage. But I guess 50% of that is sensitive wetland lot area, which is in itself is pretty unique in the village. We currently have like a small structure on the property. I think it's like 1,200 square foot like lot coverage. I guess the build out on the property that we could potentially build is we could build a 6,700 or 6,800 square foot house on the existing property, without needing zoning relief or variances. That's something we're not looking to do. We are, we have a business in the village, and ideally, we're just looking to build a separate accessory, call it a guest cottage, on the property. If everyone on the board is familiar with the neighborhood, I have like 2 properties across the street from me that are both 2-family homes. The houses in the neighborhood are generally pretty, within scale of a small, Sag Harbor village. The lots, our lot is spacious. We have a good buffer on the street. And we have a small cottage actually directly adjacent to us on Jesse Halsey. So we have this like kind of a funky lot. We have a dog leg kind of that, runs to Jesse Halsey. Right now it's a large open lawn panel space. Our preference will be to put like a small cottage there. And perhaps add a little bit to the existing main house, and pool, upgrade septic system, things like that. So that's the general idea of what we'd like to do.
Right.
And we were advised that in order to conform with code, this separate structure would need to be on a separate lot. So I guess that's the question for the planning board is, would there be a possibility of building a separate cottage
Right. So,
on a single?
Eddie, we talked about this with Brian. I reviewed the minutes from that meeting, and it sounds like you did as well. The main, just purely procedurally and based on the code, what is being proposed here requires variances that may or may not be given, and that this board can't determine. So these questions really aren't relevant to the discussion now. The only discussion is that you would need to get those variances in order to proceed further.
Okay.
And the other thing possibly worth mentioning was that there is in the code, I forget the exact words of it, but you can have an accessory apartment attached permitted in the code, and that might be worth.
Yeah, we were looking to have,
because then you would, given like you said, if assuming you have the right data about the size of the house that you could have, you have other options that might be easier to pursue, just as a practical matter.
Okay.
But just, yeah, so going back then, we would just say that this matter, you would need, if you wanted to pursue this particular plan, you would need to get variances from the other board.
Okay.
So, is that correct, Liz?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
You can't proceed here without lot area variances at the very least. if not lot width, and then you have to look and see what else you need.
Okay,
Okay, but I appreciate your time. Thanks.
thanks.
So now we're going to move on to the next item on the work session, and it's 41 Main Street. And it looks like Mr. Kelly's here for the applicant.
Correct.
On mute, but so we talked about this before we referred it to the was it the zoning board who approved the parking variance for the shed in the back. However, and this was an issue before, but it's become more clear from the building inspector of the village that there are other code violations on the site of the property. Those need to be brought up to code before any other approvals are granted by the village.
Can I address
So-
that?
Well, you can, 1 second. So just based on that and based on the, it's certainly complicated, some complicated changes that are being sought. Those issues need to be addressed before the board's going to look at this further. But go ahead, Mr. Kelly.
So since this thing has started, I think we're either through 3 or 4 building inspectors.
3.
3. It may have started, but Al Daniels was
I'm
around when it originally started. So we met with, I've met with Tom Prieto over this. I've met with Mr. Esposito over this. And our architect has been in touch with Mr. Talbot on this. I actually walked around the building with Mr. Esposito on in May of this year. I believe it was May 6th, and was there personally for an inspection where we walked up and down. And this is what we were told. We were told that because the apartment in the building upstairs has expanded to the 3rd floor loft, we were told we need to sprinkle that space and we need to sprinkle the stairs, which are the egress points for that. And that is slightly different than what Tom Prieto told us, which was that we just need to sprinkle the stairs, but fairly consistent. And we have gotten estimates for doing that. The most recent communication from Mr. Talbot is that the whole building has to be sprinkled, which is a change. But in any event, we're prepared to put in the sprinkler system and are working on that. In fact, the architect has been seeking estimates for doing that. And this involves putting in the sprinkler system in the building and also hooking it up by to a water line that comes down 114 behind the building. So that's all in the works. As to other building code things, both building inspectors said you're fine as long as you get approval from the ZBA and the planning board. Nobody said there's any problems with the structure in terms of using it as an office. And in fact, Mr. Esposito said he thought there was no problem with it. So we're getting conflicting messages. We're happy to do whatever upgrades are necessary. We haven't gotten a violation about anything in that garage building other than what we're here to do, right? Which is to make it legal for the office that's been utilized for 20 years. So if you're talking, and if you're talking about putting the sprinkler system in the building before you consider whether we, the site plan approval for the garage use as an office, I don't know how the two are quite related, but, and I don't think we have a violation. We have a letter from the building inspector.
There are pending violations in justice court
For
the 3rd floor apartment, right?
no, the only violation in justice court is the garage,
The garage, okay.
which is what we're here for. We've got a circular argument here. If you want to address
I had
garage.
copies of a violation at some point from Brian Lester, our attorney in justice court.
Violation.
Not that it matters, not that that means you can't proceed here, because of course you can still proceed here. I'm not saying that. But I think there's a letter that I sent to you from the building inspector dated October 14th, 2021.
Right, I've reviewed
It
that.
outlines the issue with the sprinkler, and then it also outlines that there's a basement area in violation of storage and fire code.
Right, and the
but
building
he
inspector that was
required-
here in May went down there and looked at that, and he said everything's
Well,
okay.
he made a
So-
mistake. And now the building inspector in place, Mr. Kelly, has put it in writing that there's a fire code violation with the basement storage.
But we haven't been cited other than this letter. We don't have,
Okay.
there's no charges pending against us. This is the
Good.
building inspector sending us this letter. Okay, and it sent it a month ago. All right, based on an inspection at the end of September after we had an inspection in May, which came up with a different result. Just want to give you the background. That's where we are.
Okay.
And we're happy to put in the sprinkler system. We're in the process of getting the cost for that, and B, we'll entertain whatever is believed to be necessary for the garage building. But for instance, that memo that from Dave Brown that was incorporated in Ms. Eisenman's memo talked about putting a bathroom in that small building. I don't know if that makes sense for anybody, but it's an adjunct, it's an accessory to the main building. It can be used, it's not being used separately. And I'm happy to have our architects be with the building
Was the
inspector on
memo
that.
from Dave Brown indicating matters that were to make it consistent with the New York State Building Code? I thought that's what that was for, right, Kathy?
Yeah, yeah. Fire safety as well as ADA compliance.
Right, but the bathroom has nothing to do with either of those. But
He's the fire marshal, so.
right, but it's the building inspector has to interpret the building code. The building inspector never has given us word that we had to make changes in that building.
Okay.
In any event, we're happy to do what you want us to do. Just let us know. If I can suggest a solution here, that maybe we have our architect work with the building inspector to make sure we have the checklist of things that need to be done, and we've submitted a proposal to address them simultaneously with the sprinkler system.
I think that's a great idea.
Yep.
And then we'll just have some documentation to that effect. And then we can move forward. Then we can have the board discuss it and move forward with that other application.
Great.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, so now we have 152 Hampton Street, which we talked about at the last meeting, and it looks like Mr. Leffler's on. And is Dennis representing this? Am I correct?
Yes.
Okay, and I see Dennis's name on there, although he's muted. So basically, at this point, we're not looking at the site plan. We're going to talk about, as a board, the SECRA review of the proposed change in use. And Nelson Pope Voorhees, via Kathy, did a report about the site. And there was also a traffic study done about the uses proposed by the applicant. And I don't know, Kathy, can you share that study?
Okay, so the first step under SECRA, once you establish the lead agency, which this board did, is to fill out what's called the Part 2 EAF, which you go through each of the resource areas and identify if there could be a potential impact. And for any that you note yes, you have to answer questions to indicate whether it's no or a small impact or a moderate to large impact may occur. So we had prepared the Part 2 and identified 3 areas where there was a potentially moderate to large impact.
Can you share your screen, Kathy?
I'll share my screen, yeah.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
sorry about that. Okay, so this is the Part 2, you can see this. And on page 1, impact on land, I mean, the types of actions that are going to cause an impact are related, these are large impacts to the actual land mass. Construction on slopes of 15% or greater. We can, look at each one of these individually, but as I go through, there's geological features, surface waters, there's none nearby, groundwater. This is actually, they're going to be installing an IA system and full drainage for the site as per the site plan. Impact and flooding is no, air, no, animals, plants, agricultural resources, aesthetics, Historic is the first one where there's a yes, because it is actually adjacent to a historic district. But this is an area that actually has been developed in the past, and it's not necessarily impacting the historic area. There's the next one is the transportation, as I had said. So this proposal is for a retail. The part that is actually concerning as far as traffic goes is the addition of the retail uses. Currently, they have approval for a non-conforming use in the residential zone as an office. The proposal is to expand the building and allow office and retail. So upon request, the applicant had provided a list of retail uses that were proposed for the site. And that's what was evaluated by our traffic engineers as possible using the Institute of Traffic Engineers or Transportation Engineers 10th edition. They have multipliers for various uses, and some of them are not of the listed items were not available in ITE, but many of them were. So we had. Let's see if he sent it as an attachment. It's definitely in the part 3. Oh, here it is. Okay. So this is the list that was submitted as permitted retail uses that were being sought for this project site. Garden center, flowers, landscape supplies. You can see them here. Let me actually make it a little bigger. Whoops, that's a lot bigger.
That's good.
Okay. Sporting goods, bicycles, surfboards, kayaks. So unfortunately, the only ITE availability for sporting goods is actually a superstore, so that would not be appropriate here. Home goods, furnishings, including furniture, art, and antiques. A beverage store or liquor store, apparel and accessories, including shoes and jewelry. Electronic, that's another one that is available. Electronics and computer, the only trip generation factors are available for a superstore. So we didn't use that. Pharmacy and health supply, and then hardware, which is actually categorized with paint stores in the ITE. And then under services, we have personal, including several. The only one that's really available through ITE is salon. So that would include a hairdresser, nail salon. Laundromat is not one of the uses, and schools are only large schools that we have the availability. So we did our best to identify those uses where there would be lower traffic generated by the use that would be more consistent than with the office use that had been previously approved for the non-conforming use of the existing building at least. So based on this, and I'll go back to the part 2 for a second. There are 2 other areas where there is potentially moderate to large impact, and those are consistency with community plans. That's because this is in a residential zone, and so it's not consistent with zoning to have an expansion of a non-conforming use. But the code allows for that evaluation by the zoning board, and it's really the proposed building expansion and the retail use might be incompatible with the surrounding residential uses across the street and to the south and west. They're actually, so of course, this is next to the gas station and convenience store on 114. I'm so used to saying 112, sorry about that. And then the last one is community character, which is, that's actually the residential zoning district and the surrounding residential neighbors. That's the character of the area. I mean, it is also, again, it's on Route 114, and it is next to a convenience store and gas station, which does play a role in the community character. And this has been developed as a non-conforming use over the years. So what Kay had started to talk about here is that this right now, this needs the zoning board's approval for expansion of the building as a non-conforming building, and also expansion of a non-conforming use to change one non-conforming use to another. They previously had gotten that permission for office use. They'd have to have the zoning board approve a change from one non-conforming use to another and expansion to allow the retail use. But they're sort of in this place where the planning board, as the lead agency, has to adopt a determination of its significance. So that way this can actually move forward. So that's what we're here to talk about tonight from the seeker perspective. How do you move forward with this? So one thought is to actually do a conditioned neg deck, a negative declaration, which actually has conditions on it, and that the applicant would have to adhere to those. Otherwise, we'd have to start over again with the seeker. Right, Liz? Is that
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay,
Yeah.
so, oh wait, let me admit, we have Rory, somebody, okay. So the way that it's done is that you prepare a part 3, which is here. Actually, I have to make it a little smaller. And I'm sorry that I couldn't circulate this. We were really just working on it. We only had the list in the last few days, and try to evaluate this was to try to actually get it done for tonight was a challenge. But I think it's important to deliberate this and try to, at least get things moving so the applicant can get to the zoning board. So as I said, transportation has been identified as an area where there is a potential to moderate to large impact. All right, again, make it a little smaller. I want to make it a little bit smaller. There we go. So it result in a moderate to large impact. And based on the evaluation of the retail uses that were submitted by the applicant, there are some of those which, when you evaluate the peak hour traffic, that would have a potentially large impact as compared to the office use that had been previously approved. So, and this, this would depend on the actual use, the size of the actual square footage of the use. But, we had to work from something. So we used 4,000 square feet, which is the total square footage of the ground floor for, it's actually a little bit more, 4,200 something for the ground floor, which would be potentially the area for retail use. So we wanted to just kind of have, how would the uses compare? And some are significantly higher, including a liquor store, a garden center, and a pharmacy. Those have very high rates at certain peak hours. So based on these factors, we felt that if we had offered the uses that actually are more consistent with lower levels of trip generation, that are more consistent with office, but not necessarily the same because they have different peak hours, that, this could be a condition of issuing a negative declaration. So before we, so those uses actually are everything else other than the liquor store, the garden center, and the pharmacy out of that list. Actually, I misspoke because, as I said, I didn't have ITE generation for the computer store or for the sports center. So it really is those uses. Yeah.
One
Okay.
question, Kathy.
Yeah.
Is it also possible to do a condition neg deck and specify the hours of operation?
Oh.
No.
Planning boards are actually not supposed to interfere with the hours of operation or businesses, unless it can relate directly to parking. There's actually a significant line of cases on that. I think it's a Home Depot case. I can pull it for you.
Okay. So then this is the,
So there's a little bit more to this because
Yeah,
there
go
are
ahead.
the two other areas that are identified as potentially moderate
right.
to potentially large impacts. And those are more, as far as the conditions go, that if those need to be evaluated under the site plan, that the applicant would be required to submit a site plan that mitigates those adverse impacts related to the impact on community character and to protect the neighboring uses. So that's how that is written up. So that's really it. So that's what
the other parts, that's a site plan component.
Exactly,
Be addressed
exactly,
later. So
exactly.
as a board, we really need to address the potential conditional neg deck on the change of use. So I think does anyone on the board have questions with regard to this part of it, this change of use and what Kathy just talked about? Or comments? Any questions or comments from the board on that?
I'll make a few comments. I live in a neighborhood that's off of 114, and not to diminish the change of use for the building, but we have a real traffic issue with 114, which is unrelated to your building issue, but the traffic along here is a major problem on 114 in and out of the village, and it hasn't been addressed or dealt with by the county or even the village in that matter. And I will say as a resident of the village that as an office use, it seems appropriate to me, but these change of uses to other impacts, I'm not sure if that's the best and or appropriate use for a change within a residential district, especially along this route, 114. And that's my opinion. So
Yeah. Any other
I agree with that because I don't think that's the proper place for just any type of business running in there. You know, the office is fine, but I mean, I'm not too even happy about that. But I mean, we go along with the offices. But as far as other businesses running in there and on 114, especially certain times of the year, I mean, 114 is hard to use it anyway. And to add businesses there, I mean, it's a residential area. And I think the people like me and some others that might live up in that area would like to keep it as residential as possible. I mean, we've got enough problem with residential growth. We don't need business growth in that area because it doesn't do anything to attract people that live there.
I think one thing just to consider and keep in mind is that there is a gas station right next to the.
Well, the gas station's been there forever. So the gas station's been there forever. I think originally, from my recollection, as far as I know, is that that building belonged to the plumber McAfee, and that was like a plumbing business and storage, whatever. And then it changed hands and they got built up this monstrosity, which was never really used other than maybe for some storage for some landscaping stuff or whatever. I mean, it's been nothing there. So nobody has any real concern about it. Now all of a sudden, we got a use for it. Somebody's coming up with a use for it. And
Well, yeah, I mean,
I don't think the uses of a retail business in that area does anything to enhance the area.
I think just to clarify a little bit, some of those comments relate to the impact and some are a little more esoteric, but what we really need to think about is under SECRA and under the impact assessment, is there one solution was a conditional negative deck under SECRA. And also this has to go, to the zoning board to get the variance for the change of use, right? It's not like we're the last buck, but is that something the board is comfortable with saying that some retail uses would be considered potentially acceptable on that site under SECRA?
I just want to add, I think the uses that Kathy identified, the retail uses, have less traffic generation than the office uses already permitted on site, or less or equal to, if I'm not mistaken.
It's actually very difficult to compare because office uses the peak hours are generally Mondays through Fridays, AM and PM, or some of these uses have peak hours on Saturdays. And that sometimes, it's really hard to compare. But we chose the retail uses that were more comparable to an office use.
So
I have I agree with Kathy's concept. I think it's a good one. That is, you condition it on the limitation of the type of use based on the impact on traffic. And it's possible to consider a neg deck with those conditions in order to get it to the place where it needs to be, which is in the ZBA, at the ZBA, to deal with the overall variance issues. It's more or less somewhat akin to what happened with the Harbor Heights project, where we had to get it to the ZBA in order to make the decisions on the variances that are required.
right.
So I would be in
That's
support
actually-
of that conceptually.
That was well put, Larry. Better put than I did it, frankly. But I think I hear what Ron and Nat said also. But I think we have to look at it from like how the consultant could study the impact on traffic. And that is, you have to look at that data to make, kind of base your decision on whether or not that's how we want to proceed as a board, or we'd vote on it and we find out. It can't keep staying in this kind of secret limbo. We have to kind of move forward one way or the other with it.
I'm okay if we want to move forward through the channels and make a negative declaration so it gets to the ZBA. I just think my opinion is if we're in a residential zone and unfortunately we have a gas station and an office use that are non-conforming uses in our neighborhood, in a residential neighborhood. So that be said, it is what it is. And I think moving forward, we can do this with a negative declaration with the ZBA. And then they can make a determination on the zoning.
Okay.
But
So-
can I just ask a question about how do we get to the point where we could declare a negative impact unless the applicant agrees that in the case of Harbor Heights, what happened was, and the debate was sort of similar to this, the applicant insisted on providing us an application that many of us were deeply concerned about, just like we are now. And unfortunately, we had to go through the pain of, and you've probably only seen the tip of the iceberg with these few letters that we've gotten from the neighbors. But we had to listen to all of the very, very legitimate, well thought out issues that people in the community had. And we did so despite knowing that whether we neg-degged it or not, that ultimately, just like in this case, the zoning board was going to have to make the decision based on the rules that govern applications in front of them. So I guess my only concern is going back to Kathy, you laying out all of those various uses. Can we get the applicant to provide us with an application? Or do we need to ask the applicant to give us an application that confines the project to a limited set of those described uses?
Well, the applicant did submit the list, and out of that list, there were certain uses that were lower traffic generators. So that's why the condition negative declaration actually identifies those, that those are the only uses that would be permitted unless there are uses that they can substantiate have, low traffic, are also low traffic generators.
Okay.
Are you more comfortable with that now, Neil?
Yeah, I understand it better now.
Okay. I think then at this point, unless Kathy or Liz have anything else, can we move to adopt the conditional negative declaration under SECRA?
Yeah.
So do I have a motion?
Hands are raised.
It's not, I mean, it's not a public hearing, so I don't know
Oh,
how
okay.
you want to.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry. I know when it's time for public hearing is when, it's appropriate to accept comments on this application.
I would also encourage the neighbors that had submitted letters in writing to submit those as well to the zoning board, because it doesn't necessarily make it, so that they should also go directly to the zoning board as well. But still, there will be a public hearing there and a public hearing here eventually.
Right, and that's when that's the appropriate time for comments. So with that being said, could someone make a motion?
I'll move.
And a second?
I'll second.
Okay, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right.
So I need to hear then if there's anyone, it sounds like to poll that everyone voted, but Nat, did you vote aye or nay or?
Nay.
Okay, so it still passes.
Yeah.
So, so then we now adopt what was written up by Kathy, and then we'll send it over to the zoning.
Yeah, this actually, just so that way everyone's aware, a condition negative declaration has a noticing requirement as well. It needs to go in the environmental notice bulletin, which is a DEC website. I'll work with Doris to get that done. I think we need to have it submitted by Wednesday for it to be on the following Thursday, but they may have a different calendar this week because of Thanksgiving. So, but we'll get it into the ENB and circulated to the involved agencies.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, so then the next item in the work session was 37 John and 12 Henry Street. We discussed this at the last meeting. There was a little miscommunication. So this needs to be set for public hearing for the next meeting and noticed. So Doris, could you please make a note of that? And then the referrals to the Suffolk County Health Department need to be done. But I think
yeah, that actually would happen at the time of final. So this is a preliminary subdivision. The other referral needed to go to the Harbor Committee for a recommendation, which occurred at their last meeting, right, Doris? We have that. I'm pretty sure that we have the recommendation from the Harbor Committee for consistency with LWRP.
okay.
But yeah,
So I think
needs to be noticed and all.
needs to be noticed and set for a public hearing for the next meeting. Thanks, Doris. And then 63 Page Main was on the work session, but the applicant requested it to be adjourned to the next meeting, which we're going to do. And then there's one more item that I think it was supposed to be moved up to the work session. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that, even though it's down as a discussion item in the regular meeting. It's 11 Spring Street. Discussion of a proposed new farm brewery location. Everyone knows, or imagine they know the property. Was a landscaping center with the old train station building on the property. I don't know if anyone from the applicant's on the phone or on the Zoom.
I'm here.
Okay, hi Rory.
Hi.
So Liz and or Kathy can elaborate on this, but the discussion of proposed farm brewery location, brewing is not an activity listed in the village code as a business use. So that being said, the more appropriate channel for probably looking into this as a possible option would be through the trustees. Is that correct, Liz?
I mean, typically if a code doesn't list a use in its use tables, it's not permitted.
So currently that use, if it's not listed, not permitted, you would have to, figure out a way to make that happen. And that's not something the planning board can do. So.
Did you look at that already?
Can I just mention something? I read through this whole thing here and I noted they had a point in here about a brewing, and the brewing is in the title. But I thought it read to me that what they're proposing is a tasting room and retail operation, and not brewing beer at the location. So that maybe that was a miscommunication, but I was looking through this. And is that correct though?
That's correct. We have a manufacturing off-site in Riverhead, and this would be a tasting room.
Rory, this is Larry Perrine. I have a farm winery license.
Larry.
And I know that about 10 years ago, in the early part of the Cuomo administration, we had a big craft beverage meeting, several of them. And what happened was the governor and all of the big wigs in the different appropriate departments of state government decided to streamline, put into concert the rules governing farm wineries, which the Farm Winery Act was 1976, with a farm brewery licensing process and also distillery licensing process. And we do have a local distiller now in Sagaponack. And that being said, there was an evolution of understanding of what this is, what can be done. And do you have to make beer on site? It's a question. And I think it's been answered for wineries on the North Fork. And a lot of wineries on the North Fork, quote unquote wineries, don't have their own production facility, but they use a custom winemaking facility called Premium Wine Group. And they get their own farm winery license, and then they contract with Premium Wine Group to produce it. And they can have and do have retail shops, tasting rooms in various places on the North Fork. Is this more or less what is being considered? Because I read carefully, like Ron did today, what this was about. And it's going to be a while before the sewerage system gets developed to the point where you could actually make even 3 barrels of beer there. So is this more or less what is being proposed?
That's absolutely correct, Larry. So this would be a second branch, and I think it's very similar. The farm for the farm brewery, this would be the second branch, which would be just a tasting room in Sag Harbor. I wanted to be transparent with everybody, and Kay, I apologize for the confusion here. Down the line, we really would like to brew something on site and be an authentic brewery and serve our beer on site in Sag Harbor. But I'm under no illusion that that's not acceptable right now. It's not even in the rules. I hope it will be at some point, as I hope the sewage will be connected at 11 Spring. So what we can do at the very least is showcase our beer in an environment within Sag Harbor where we plan to be for a long, long time. Manufacturing will take place in our first branch, which is an alternating proprietorship with North Fork Brewing Company in Riverhead.
Okay. So that clarifies that. So then the next, so Liz or Kathy, what would the?
It's in the Village Business District, which does allow bar/tavern as a permitted use. It also allows a restaurant. I mean, a bar is supposed to have food as incidental to the drinking. So I guess it depends on how you want to define this. Is it more restaurant or is it more bar? But it is a permitted use. So we would evaluate this under the site plan criteria like a normal site plan. So we would just look at that, proposed change in the building and parking and, screening and so forth. Everything that we look at as part of a site plan review.
So that would be the next step. And then is there any change because it's currently a garden center? Do they have to apply for some sort of change of use for the site?
That would be part of the site plan application. Okay. Yeah.
All right. So if
this is a longer process, and I'm not sure if that is, if you could clarify that, that would be helpful. We are also willing to operate strictly as a retail operation up until a tasting room can be formed.
So that actually would then depend on interpretation from the building inspector as to whether the building that you're using, I mean, how much are you going to change that and so forth? But if you're just going to use the actual building that you have, the railroad building for that purpose and the on-site parking, I would meet with the building inspector and ask if that, if that can be done under the current CO. Or if he could do a change of use without doing a site plan application through the planning board. It depends. If it's the same level of intensity, parking requirements, sewerage flow, then you may not need to have a site plan review.
That's if it's internal only, Kathy?
Yeah, generally speaking, yes. I guess you would be getting rid of everything that's there for the garden center.
I'm sorry we stepped in a little late here. I'm Phil Buckman. I'm the landlord.
Oh, hi, Phil.
Oh, hi. We are on there.
I mean,
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, no, you're welcome to sit in. We're just going through, help, I guess, a little bit steering Mr. McAvoy in the right direction.
Sure. Just for your information, we did have another retail store there in the 2000s. Yardley Florist operated out of there as a separate business. We, for the past year, have operated the garden center without that building, with the intent of doing something else in there. We had a gift shop in there for a number of years. After we had a florist there, she was there for a number of years, and then after the florist left, we set it up as more of a gift shop for our area, and we discontinued that. It didn't have a different name. It was still under Sag Harbor Garden Center, but there was different, activity in there, which was 100% retail. And so, as Rory and I were discussing this, we did decide that, at least initially, until the use could be changed or the sewer goes in or whatever had to happen, that it would be 100% a retail store. So that's where we're coming from as the landlord.
The applicant should talk with the building inspector and see
Yeah.
if that's feasible.
Okay.
And
And,
then,
you know, I would refer to section 300-14.3 of the village code. It's a very long paragraph, paragraph A, and it does have something that says that any provision of this are not subject to site plan review. So you can find in there if there's certain changes that meet certain conditions. So that way you would not need to come for a site plan review, but that would depend.
Okay, Kathy, thank you. Is that, you said 300-14.3?
14.3A. Yeah.
14.3A, okay.
Yeah, and you're welcome to call me if you have questions about that before you speak with Chris Talbot, who's the building inspector.
Okay.
all right, great. Thank you. So next time we're going to do this in the beginning, but so now that's the work session. So we'll just do, I feel like we should do the Pledge of Allegiance and start the regular meeting. So I pledge allegiance to the flag
The flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands,
one
One
nation,
nation,
under
under
God,
God,
indivisible, with
liberty
liberty and justice for all.
Okay, so could I get a motion to approve the minutes taken October 26th, 2021, please?
So moved.
And a second. All those in favor? Aye.
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 Aye. Also carried. Then the only item we need to discuss is correspondence requiring action. We talked last meeting about the waterfront overlay district, the local law recommendations. The village board of trustees sent over with some changes from the last iteration that may also be changing slightly in the next round. Correct, Kathy and Liz? But not major, nothing major.
If there are substantive changes, it will have to be renoticed.
Okay.
So far, it doesn't look like there are many, but
So I think today Kathy circulated.
No, just to you, Kay, sorry.
Oh, whoops. Okay. Well, I've got a letter, a draft of a letter based on our discussion from last time, which says that basically the planning board recommends or recognizes that this is positive for the village, these changes to the zoning code. And that, you know, in particular, expanding the district boundary, that's one of the main changes, was positive, requiring the properties to provide views and access to pedestrians and the public, and ensuring the land uses are available to the public by prohibiting residential use within the village business and office districts, and introducing the requirement of a parking plan if the projects are larger, i.e. over 3,500 square feet. The other components that I think we're going to want to incorporate in this letter to the board and the mayor were that the planning board supports the expansion of this, but wants suggests that some parts of this be studied further. And that doesn't change that the planning board would, recommend that the trustees adopt the laws as rewritten, but one of those would be a study of the Cora Maria property, because that's part of the expansion of this overlay district. And another would be studying the parking requirements, the current situation in the village for parking. And then I think the other thing that Kathy and we discussed was possibly studying the height of the buildings and or the uses in the village. Is that right, Kathy? I'm not sure that's in that letter you sent over to me, but I don't know.
The one that is not in there is the consideration for reducing heights in other locations other than the waterfront
Right.
lots. or the, you know, allowing, you know, for smaller uses.
Yeah.
That wasn't, I don't know that we didn't, maybe we talked about it last time, but
I mean, it's really just basically I think the moral of the story here is this law is going to be helpful for the village in regulating redevelopment on the waterfront and making sure it's more consistent with what residents want. And I think it might make our job a little easier. I don't think it makes it harder. I think initially there was a lot of talk about trying to do away with parking variances, but that just wasn't happening. It just provides us with some more tools to look at these projects, and I think ultimately it'll be positive for going forward. So with that being said, I don't know what Kathy and Liz thinks the best thing should Kathy and I work on this letter one more round and then distribute it to the board and then make sure everyone's okay with it?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think we can just do that by email, right? If everyone's
Yes.
okay, they can just let us know and then we'll send it on
Mhm.
to the trustees and the mayor. Does that sound good to everybody?
Yes.
Are we also suggesting about the revisions in the use groups? I know that the idea about having smaller uses is good, but you know, the whole use group change was eliminated, which would have helped with a lot of other use issues rather than bucketing them in all these other areas. Is that something we want to suggest that they look at again?
Suggest that gets studied further. The part of the thing was in the last go around, the consultant looked at a lot of really useful ideas but we didn't really study the idea of the uses being changed or being smaller, there wasn't a study done.
Mhm.
And so it's just kind of guesswork then. Is this good or is this going to be positive or negative for the village if there's not a study done? So the idea here is, we're getting some changes that are positive, but at the same time, we're saying, okay, these particular issues would ideally be studied more so that we have a better idea about if there are other changes that should be made to the code.
Right.
Does that make sense, Liz and/or Kathy?
Mm-hmm.
Everyone else?
Yes.
Okay, so
Right.
then I think that's a good plan for moving forward with this particular item. So
Basically, we're suggesting that it would be positive to do a larger master plan with parking, with a parking study, something to that effect, right? Seems like we're going down that road.
Well, there's already the LWRP, but yeah, just these are issues that need to be studied more or potentially be studied so that they can be better addressed by the code.
I think the one other item that needs further study that was brought up at the last planning board meeting was for Core Maria.
Right.
That was
Yes.
the other one, that a specific property.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that there's a number of items, the parking, the uses, Core Maria, and maybe even the size of uses that deserves more attention.
Yeah. I mean, it could. Yeah, exactly. So I think that's a good path forward.
So Liz, what would the resolution read? Would it be that the planning board authorizes the submission of a recommendation? Or
Yeah, you should circulate the letter as revised so all the board members can make their amendments to it and be happy with the final version. And then just adopt a resolution authorizing that you send that letter to the Village Board of Trustees.
Okay.
Or you can actually just put the letter in the form of a resolution if you prefer to do it that way too, and just adopt it at the next meeting.
Okay.
You want to wait? They should wait till the next meeting?
Well, I think they should adopt it. I do.
Adopt
We're
the
not
actual letter. Okay.
moving on this in December, so
Okay.
I don't believe we are. Right, Kathy?
I don't know. We still have to introduce the changes at the next
Right.
public hearing, so I don't think so. Hot off the press, though, I did hear back from Andy Freeling.
Oh.
The Suffolk County Planning Commission will see this as a matter for local determination.
Oh, that's a huge change.
Which is that is because
Great.
they see this as modifications to an existing code rather than, a new code. So,
That's
yeah, so that actually, one less layer, I guess.
okay, great.
But-
All right, so then we'll work on that, Kathy, you and I.
Okay, sounds good.
All right, so then with that being said, thank you, everyone, and could I get a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. So carried. All right, thank you guys so much for your time.
Thank
Have
you,
a great-
everybody.
Happy Thanksgiving, everyone.
Happy
Yes.
Thanksgiving.
Happy
Everybody have a wonderful Thanksgiving.
You too.
Goodbye.
Thank you. Happy
Bye.
Thanksgiving.
Bye,
Have a good
everyone.
night.
Night.
Bye,
Night,
Kathy.
Doris.
Good night, Neil.
Good night, Doris.
Night, Larry.
Thank Doris.
Take care.